Have you ever found yourself working to the point of exhaustion, yet still scrambling to pay the bills at the end of the month? There's a silent fatigue that many people carry on their shoulders. Every morning they rush out the door, jostling through the crowd, working 8, even 10 hours a day, only to return home with an empty wallet and a mind full of worries. It's not that they're lazy, they're hardworking sometimes to the point of burnout. But strangely, the more effort they put in, the deeper they seem to sink into an endless cycle: wages that barely cover living expenses, debts that grow year after year, youth slipping away, and dreams put on hold. Some might ask, is life just unfair? But others have started to question something else. Could it be that I've been thinking about money and work the wrong way from the start? Because there are people living in the same society who have time to wrest steady streams of income and clearly planned futures. They don't work themselves to the bone their entire lives, yet they live freely and with plenty of choices. So what exactly sets their fate apart? In today's video, let's take an honest look, not to blame or complain, but to find a new path. The path of a wealth-oriented mindset. And take a moment to comment with a positive commitment to yourself. Something like, I choose to relearn financial thinking to live more freely each day. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on important lessons that can help you rebuild a solid financial foundation. But to truly understand why some people work tirelessly all their lives and remain poor, while others seem to accumulate wealth effortlessly, you need to start with an honest question to yourself. Where do you stand in this money game? Being rich or poor isn't about luck. It's about how you generate income and the mindset you bring to work every day. Some people work themselves to the bone and still can't escape the bills. Others work less, but the money keeps coming in. The difference isn't in the number of hours worked. It's about where you stand and the direction you're heading. To see this clearly, I want you to look with me at a classic model, Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow Quadrant from his famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This model divides all of us into 4 groups based on how we generate income. The first group, employees, they trade time, skills, and labor for a regular monthly paycheck. They rely on the stability created by others. If they lose their job, the cash flow stops immediately. The second group, self-employed individuals like doctors, lawyers, freelancers. They don't work for someone else, but they still trade time for money. The difference is they have more control, but their income still depends on their presence. Take a day off, lose a day's income. The third group, business owners, those who build systems. They don't need to be present all the time because the work is carried out by others, by processes, by systems. The cash flow continues even when they step away temporarily. And the fourth group, investors, those who make money work for them. They understand that money isn't just a medium of exchange, but a tool for generating profits. They create income from assets, stocks, real estate funds, strategic investments where each dollar invested today can yield returns for many years to come. What's noteworthy is that most of us, especially the poor and middle class, tend to stay in the first 2 groups. Working hard, earning money by the hour, always thinking that if we just work harder, save better, things will improve. But in reality, to escape the grind, you have to gradually move to the other side of the cash flow quadrant, where cash flow no longer depends entirely on labor. At this point, you might be thinking, I don't have the capital to start a business, nor am I savvy in investing. So what should I do? The good news is, you don't need to become a billionaire overnight. But what you absolutely must do if you want to change your financial destiny is to change how you view each of your daily actions. Every working hour, every money-making decision is steering you in one direction, towards consumption or accumulation, towards dependence or autonomy, towards constant worry about today or building a foundation for tomorrow. When you can see that picture, you'll start to understand why. With the same amount of time in a day, the wealthy can go so much further. To make it easier, I've compiled some of the most dangerous reasons why many people work hard all their lives and still remain poor, along with solutions to escape that situation. Listen and apply them if you can. Number 1. The poor race against time. The rich build systems that manage time. Do you remember when I mentioned the feeling of working endlessly and still lacking? There's something deep inside that makes you feel like you're being pulled into a never-ending cycle. And the harder you try, the more exhausted you become. I want you to reconsider something you may have never questioned. How are you using your time? Because this is where all the differences begin. The poor often don't know what they're trading. They only know that if they don't work, they won't have money. They use time as a unit to exchange for income work. An hour, get paid for an hour. So every morning when they open their eyes, it's a race. They rush out, they don't dare rest, don't dare get sick, don't dare pause. Because just slowing down a bit, everything could collapse. Every expense would immediately pile up. The danger lies in this lifestyle seems very reasonable, very responsible, but in reality, it keeps you from ever stepping out of yourself. You live each day as if borrowing time without control, without the ability to accumulate. You work today just to survive today. But every hour that passes is an hour lost, leaving no value. Afterward, no time asset being built. That's how most poor people live. And they don't realize that the way they use time is what's keeping them in the same place for years. The rich, they're not more diligent than you. But they have a different perspective. They see time as an asset. They don't spend time, they invest it. They know there are hours used for work that yield results once. But there are also hours that, if used correctly, will generate value hundreds of times afterward, not magically, but strategically and intentionally. You'll notice the difference lies in the speed of accumulation. When you use time linearly, work today, earn today, you don't accumulate anything for tomorrow. But when you spend time creating something that continues to generate value, then tomorrow you'll still receive results even if you do nothing that day. That's when time becomes a profit-generating asset, not just a consumable unit. You don't need to own a business to change this. Even if you're freelancing or doing manual labor, there are still ways for you to gradually detach income from real time. But to do that, you must first change your thinking, stop using time to run and start using it to build. Because only when you use time to create something beyond the present moment will you have the chance to free it. And once you've built this habit, it doesn't have to be grand immediately. Gradually, you'll find you have more time to breathe, to think, to live. Not because you're lazier, but because you're using time more intentionally. It's a very different feeling. A feeling that before, when I was spending in manual work, I never thought I could reach. You may not be able to do all of that today, but you can start with a very simple task. Write down 3 things you do each week that if you're absent, income stops. Write them down to see them. See them to dare to ask, is there a way for those 3 things to no longer depend entirely on you? Because as long as your time is still tightly bound to income, you're still being limited. Not because you're not good enough, but because you haven't placed your time in the right spot. Number 2, poor people spend money emotionally. Rich people manage money with principles. Money is never just money. It carries emotions, feelings of lack, pride, ego, and sometimes a deep emptiness we cannot even name. That is why the way we spend money is often not about need or don't need, but about how we feel after spending it. Most poor people do not spend based on calculations. They spend based on emotion. Emotions of scarcity, emotions of being left out, the need to prove they deserve to enjoy life too. And those emotions, if fed over the years, turn into a vicious cycle. Earn money, spend it all. No rules, no plan, no pause. I once had a friend who worked in an office for nearly 10 years. Her salary wasn't low, but she was always in debt, constantly borrowing. Why, every time she felt stressed or discouraged, she would order something online. A new pair of shoes, an expensive outfit, a high-end spa treatment. She called it treating herself. But really, she was trying to patch emotional wounds with a credit card. Maybe you have done the same, or maybe you are doing it now. I understand because I've been there too. Poor people do not spend because they are dumb. They spend because they cannot control themselves. They let emotions drive their behavior, and over time, those emotions become the very thing that drains their finances, one small transaction at a time. Rich people are different, not because they are cold, but because they understand this. If you cannot control small money, you will never be able to handle big money. Rich people live by principles. They do not spend impulsively, they spend according to a plan. They know their budget well, how each spending category is allocated, and where the limits are. They do not let instant desires override long-term stability. One classic rule many wealthy people still follow, even those who make millions of dollars a year, is the 50 sharps. 30 sharps 20 rule: 50% for essentials like housing, food, transportation, 30% for wants and experiences, and 20% for savings and investments. It sounds simple, but that simplicity is what creates lasting change. Because rich people do not need to be strict, they just need to be clear. Every dollar has a reason. Every purchase has a boundary. A truly wealthy person will not hesitate to wait 24 hours before buying an expensive item. Not because they are stingy, but because they know if you have to buy something just to feel like you are not less than others, you have already lost to yourself. Did you know Steve Jobs wore the same simple black shirt for years? Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought back in the 1950s. Of course, you do not have to live exactly like them. But look at how they think true wealth does not need to show off. True wealth comes from self-control. If you want financial freedom, you have to start there. Control in spending. And that does not come from a high income, it comes from setting rules for yourself and sticking to them. Even a simple rule like pausing for 24 hours before buying anything over $100 can pull you out of impulsive spending decisions. You do not need to overhaul your whole life. You just need a small pause long enough for logic to speak before emotion clicks by. Number 3. Poor people fear risk. Rich people manage risk with knowledge. Poor people often live by the belief that safety is the top priority. But what they do not realize is that feeling of safety is actually the biggest risk. According to a 2023 report by the U.S. Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of Americans could not afford a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. What's surprising is that this includes not only the unemployed or low-income groups, but also full-time workers with stable incomes who still live paycheck to paycheck. Why does this happen? Because they avoid risk. They choose to keep money in a bank account instead of learning how to invest. They spend for comfort instead of learning how to manage cash flow. They prioritize short-term security, but the price they pay is long-term risk, the risk of falling behind. Meanwhile, rich people are not afraid of risk, but they are not reckless either. They understand that risk is part of the game. But with the right knowledge, strategy, and discipline, they can turn risk into an advantage. As Ray Dalio, one of the world's greatest hedge fund managers, once said, "Understanding risk is understanding life. And if you do not understand risk, you are playing a game where you do not know the rules." Rich people do not throw money into the market like it is a gamble. They have a plan. They diversify 30% in stocks, 40% in real estate, 10% in bonds, 20% in cash. They do not put all their eggs in one basket. They spread risk in a way that aligns with their personal financial goals. For example, a study by Vanguard, one of the largest asset management firms in America, found that a diversified portfolio with stocks, bonds, and cash has returned an average of 7 to 8% annually over the past 30 years, even through market ups and downs. Do you know what 8% a year can do if you invest $500 a month? With an 8% return after 30 years, you would not just have $180,000. You would have about $745,000 thanks to the power of compound interest, a number that traditional saving methods could hardly achieve, especially with average bank interest rates now below 1% per year. The difference is, rich people know that investing is not risk-free, but not investing is an even bigger risk. If you do not let your money work for you, you will always have to work for your money. So the question for you is, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of losing $1,000 in an ETF fund? Are you afraid of reading a financial book you might not understand at first? Are you afraid you are not smart enough to grasp the market? Remember, every wealthy person once started knowing nothing. The difference is, they were willing to learn. Here is a simple, doable, but powerful suggestion. Pick one investment area that feels unfamiliar to you. It could be the stock market, mutual funds, REITs, or even investing in your own skills. Spend 30 minutes a day, just 30 minutes to research. Take notes and get comfortable. Maybe you do not know where to start. Then start with questions. Why do people invest in this? What are the specific risks? How can those risks be managed? As long as you approach it with a mindset to understand rather than to profit instantly, you are already on the same path as successful people. Bit by bit, your fear will shrink, and as fear fades, opportunity becomes clearer. Because the world is not short on opportunities. It is short on people who dare to understand and act. Number 4, poor people work alone. Rich people build networks. If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. That old saying may sound cliche, but it's a solid foundation for how wealthy people approach success. Rich people do not build wealth by isolating themselves from the world. They choose to be part of an ecosystem where every relationship is a support and every connection opens a door to new opportunities. In contrast, many poor people hold tight to the belief in self-reliance. They're used to doing everything themselves, thinking that handling it all solo is safer, cheaper, and more in control. But what they fail to see is this: when you work alone, you limit your own vision and slow down your growth. We can't know what we don't know. And when you stay in the same familiar circle, you keep repeating the same habits both in your work and in your financial mindset. The wealthy understand this clearly. They intentionally step outside their area of expertise to connect with people who are smarter from different fields because they know if your thinking is not constantly sharpened, it dulls over time. Think about startup communities where people openly share business plans just to get feedback. or mastermind groups where members report progress weekly, analyze strengths and weaknesses together, and set new challenges for each other. These communities don't create instant success, but they raise the standard of thinking and force each person to level up or get left behind. A friend of mine named David used to be a factory technician in Minnesota. He never got an MBA. He had no startup capital, but he joined an online personal finance community where people shared how they invest in ETFs, save more effectively, and optimize their taxes. At first, all he knew was how to keep money in a savings account. But within 2 years, David built a portfolio worth over $100,000 just by learning from people in that group. Not because he was an expert, but because he was willing to connect and learn. Wealth does not start with intelligence. It starts when you find the right people to learn from. We're often told, find a mentor, but no one tells you that a mentor is not someone who drags you along. They're someone who's willing to share if you're serious enough to listen and take action. They don't like being pestered, but they always make time for people who are genuinely committed. And don't think you need to know someone famous or ultra successful. Sometimes a person just 2 or 3 years ahead of you can be the perfect mentor. What matters is that you see value in them and you give before you expect to receive. In fact, a study from Stanford University found that people with strong social networks, including professional relationships, mentors, and teammates, are 58% more likely to reach their financial goals compared to those who rely only on personal effort. This is not just about skill, it's a psychological edge. Because when you have someone walking beside you, you're less likely to quit and more determined to hit your goals. So instead of only focusing on technical skills, start investing seriously in your network. Start with one simple action. Invite a respected friend out for coffee. Ask them a thoughtful question. Listen more than you speak. And if possible, offer them help with something you're good at before asking them for help in return. Do not underestimate the power of a quality connection. One right conversation can change how you make decisions. One right person can open a door you never knew existed. Money can help you move fast. But meaningful relationships will keep you from falling when you rise. Number 5. Poor people wait for a paycheck. Rich people create cash flow. Poor people have a fixed relationship with income. They wait for someone to send them money. They work, then wait for their salary. They finish a job, then wait to be paid. Their income depends on someone else's actions, and when the payment shows up on time, they feel secure. This is called active income. You have to be present to earn money. On the other hand, passive income is money that keeps coming in even when you are not directly working. The difference is not just in the amount it's in how you control your time, energy, and life choices, but in reality, that feeling of security is fake. Because if just 1 month goes by without a paycheck, everything crashes. They have no cash flow of their own. They rely entirely on a boss, a client, a payroll system, all of which are outside their control. Rich people are different. They don't live by getting paid. They live by cash flow. Cash flow is not just money you receive. It's money that continues to come in whether or not someone approves it. It might come from dividends, from rental property, from a digital product that sells again and again, from a platform they built. Every month, whether they work or not, the money still comes in because it does not depend on someone else saying yes. Passive income can come from many specific sources: rental, real estate, book royalties, software, music rights, vending machines, franchise income, or profits from stocks and investment funds. The key is choosing the right source and building it patiently from the start. The difference is not in how much, but in the position. Poor people operate from a reactive position. I work, someone will pay me. Rich people operate from a proactive position. I create something, and it generates cash flow for me. That positioning matters more than the number. You could be making $10,000 a month, but if all of it comes from a paycheck, you're still in a reactive position. Meanwhile, someone else makes just $2,000 a month from assets, but because that money does not depend on anyone, they are closer to financial freedom than you might think. This difference isn't obvious short term, but over the years, it creates two very different paths. One person earns a good salary, spends comfortably, but has no passive income. When they lose their job, everything comes to a halt. Another person sets aside a few $100s each month to invest in dividend funds or build an automated sales channel. It may start small, but after 5 to 10 years, that stream becomes a quiet source of money. Not huge, but enough to keep them from being trapped by the next missed paycheck. And this is not just for people who are already rich. Many started building cash flow when they only had a few $100s in their pocket. What they had was not capital, but a different perspective. They didn't ask, when will I get a raise? They asked, how can I build an income stream that doesn't need anyone's approval? That is the essence of passive income money that does not rely on you working hour by hour. True financial freedom begins when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. That's when you stop working to survive and start working to live with purpose. I am not saying you have to quit your job. I just want you to recognize this. A salary is not cash flow. A salary is an exchange. True cash flow is what continues even when you are not showing up every day. Poor people cling too tightly to the feeling of security from a fixed income, but they fail to see that anything fully dependent on someone else is never truly secure. And if there is one thing the wealthy understand better than anyone, it's this: live on a system you create. Number 6. Poor people learn to get a job. Rich people learn to take ownership. From a young age, most of us were taught a familiar path: study hard, get a good degree, and land a stable job. For many, education was the only ticket to safely enter adulthood, and for a long time, that way of thinking was not wrong. But as society evolves, technology advances, and markets shift, that same mindset has become a limitation. Poor people learn to get hired. They learn just enough to qualify, just enough to keep the job, just enough to survive. Their knowledge is wrapped around their current job software procedures, technical skills. Everything centers around one question: what should I learn to get a job? Rich people are different. They learn to take ownership, not necessarily to own a business, but to own their time, their cash flow, their decisions. They learn so they are not dependent on any one company, boss, or title. Their goal is not to get hired, it's to have options. The difference is not in the volume of knowledge, but in the purpose of learning. Poor people learn to adapt. Rich people learn to direct. Poor people learn to respond. Rich people learn to lead. And here's the catch. The traditional education system does not teach this. No one teaches you personal finance, negotiation, asset building, or how to understand markets. The skills that lead to freedom are outside the standard curriculum, and because of that, most poor people never learn them. Rich people know this. They do not wait for someone else to design a training plan for them. They learn with intention, and they focus on skills that can become assets, not just degrees. They learn personal finance to keep money, grow it, and break free from debt cycles. They learn investing to understand how money works and how to spot opportunities in volatility. They learn communication, negotiation, and decision-making, so they have a voice in any room. They learn tech, digital platforms, and data so they are not pushed out of the new economy. They learn sales, marketing, and personal branding to bring their value to market without relying on a middleman. According to Harvard Business Review, 90% of self-made millionaires have the habit of learning every day after age 30, not to get another degree, but to solve real-life financial challenges, expanding income, protecting assets, starting companies, or pivoting careers. And here's what's important: they do not learn aimlessly. They pick a core skill, go deep, and connect it with supporting skills. For example, someone learning to invest will also study financial statements, market psychology, and emotional control during downturns. Someone, digital content, will also dive into storytelling, platform algorithms, and consumer behavior. Meanwhile, poor and overworked middle-class individuals often only learn for short-term needs to pass a test, pass a certification, or keep their job. And when a big disruption hits, they have no skill strong enough to take them elsewhere. Learning to get a job is necessary, but if that's where you stop, you'll spend your life depending on someone else's decision. Rich people learn to escape that reactive position. They do not wait for opportunities, they learn to create them. LinkedIn Learning's 2022 survey found that 94% of employers value soft skills over degrees. Yet 73% of workers still focus on short-term technical skills. That means most people are still learning to keep a seat rather than to build a path. You don't need to learn everything, but you must choose a skill that can generate assets, not just jobs. Learn to understand money, value people, and how to stand your ground when the world changes. Rich people do not learn to be perfect. They learn enough to start, then keep learning as they go. They understand that in a world of constant change, the winner is not the one who knows the most, but the one who learns the fastest, applies it earliest, and sticks with it the longest. Number 7. Poor people cling to old habits. Rich people pivot quickly when needed. In finance, it's not the smartest person who wins. It's the one who adapts in time. Poor people, or more accurately, people without a wealth mindset, often cling to what's familiar. They work the same way, spend the same way, make decisions the same way, without asking, is this still working? Even when the environment changes, the market shifts, and technology moves ahead, they keep following old patterns. Not because those patterns are effective, but because they used to be. They're used to using cash, so they resist digital banking. They're used to hourly jobs, so they resist flexible income models. They're used to managing money with pen and paper, so they avoid learning about investments or cash flow. Habits become beliefs. and beliefs become barriers. Rich people behave very differently. They are not loyal to methods, they are loyal to results. When the old way no longer gets them closer to their goal, they pivot without hesitation. They're willing to shift, relearn, and change direction as long as it's the right time. Not because they're cold, but because they understand the cost of slow change is always higher than the cost of a mistake. We saw this clearly during the pandemic. While many panicked over lost jobs, income, and direction, others made a quick pivot. They taught online instead of waiting for classrooms to reopen. They sold through live streams instead of relying on a storefront. They restructured their personal finances instead of sticking to old spending habits. They did not wait for things to go back to normal. They acted as if this is the new normal, and because of that, they led the way. This ability to pivot is not impulsiveness. It comes from constantly reassessing. Is this way of doing things still serving me? Is this spending style still aligned with my financial goals? Is my current skill set still creating opportunities? Or is it time for an upgrade? Poor people delay those questions. They stay tied to careers, lifestyles, and spending habits that once helped them survive, but now leave them exposed when big waves hit. They do not know how to swim a different way when the tide changes. Rich people do not wait for collapse to make adjustments. They observe market shifts, consumer behavior, and tech trends, and pivot before they are forced to. They don't let the market dictate their move, they move to lead the market. McKinsey's 2023 study showed that individuals and companies who can pivot within 6 to 12 months of a major change are 3 times more likely to achieve sustainable growth than those who delay. Not because they're lucky, but because they're willing to step outside their comfort zone. One common trait among fast-pivoting people, they do not attach their identity to outdated methods. They don't think I used to be great at this as a reason to keep going. They think if this no longer fits the market, I need to change before I get left behind. Pivoting from a personal finance angle can start small. Letting go of an investment style that no longer works. Changing your budgeting method to match new goals. Learning a new skill instead of clinging to one that's wearing out. Rich people treat change as a reflex, not a crisis. And because of that, they are the ones leading when new trends emerge. They are not overwhelmed by transitions because they steered their ship in a new direction before the storm came. Poor people, on the other hand, often react too slowly. Not because they lack information, but because they are too attached to their routines. And the most dangerous thing about a habit is that it makes you confuse familiar with correct. You cannot build wealth by repeating an old formula in a world that changes by the hour. You can only go far if you know when to stop and when to shift. Number 8. Poor people doubt their own worth. Rich people raise their value. I have seen so many people who are hardworking, kind, even exhausted, and still struggling to make ends meet. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because for years they never stopped to ask themselves a simple question: what am I really worth, and am I being paid accordingly? Poor people often operate with a mindset of, I'll take whatever I can get. They're not used to negotiating. They're not used to reassessing their own worth over time. Some keep the same income they had 5 or 7 years ago, even though today's job demands more, comes with more pressure, and requires sharper skills. It's not that they are lazy, it's that they've never formed the habit. They just keep going, keep enduring, keep getting by. And slowly they begin to believe, maybe this is all I'll ever be worth. I once knew a freelance designer who spent 5 years taking only small gigs for a few $100s, despite having solid skills. No one lowballed him, but he never thought to raise his rates. To him, the old pricing became part of his financial identity. He got used to it, didn't question it, and no one challenged him to update it. Until one day, a client asked, "Why don't you charge more? This is really good work." That made him pause for the first time. And once he adjusted his self-perception, his income shifted dramatically. Not because his skills suddenly skyrocketed, but because he stopped treating himself like someone who had to sell himself short. I'm not telling you this to say you should overcharge or be overly confident. What I want to share is this: your value is an asset. It deserves to be recognized, reassessed, and updated over time. If you're still using an old number just because that's what I've always been paid, then you're anchoring yourself to a lower standard, no matter how far you've actually come. Rich people think differently. They do not let others decide what they're worth. They reflect on their performance, observe their outcomes, and set a lifestyle that aligns with their value. And when there's a gap between what they're worth and what they earn, they act. Not emotionally, but with data and professional self-respect. I once asked a freelance consultant why, after 3 years and dozens of successful clients, she still charged the same rates as day one. She laughed and said, half joking, "I forgot, I'm not the same person I used to be." It sounded funny, but it's true for so many of us. We live so long under an old price tag, we forget that we've outgrown it. Some forms of value cannot be measured in money. But many of us are letting the market undervalue us. Not because others don't see our worth, but because we've never spoken up. In business, there's a concept called revaluing assets. So what about you? When was the last time you sat down and revalued yourself? I'm not saying everyone needs to think of themselves like a product, but if you're living without clearly understanding the value you bring, it's easy to get pulled into someone else's life path shaped by their expectations and forget that you can adjust your own path at any time. People with a wealth mindset do not live by income inertia. They do not let others assign a number to them and then accept it for the next 10 years. They track themselves like investors track stocks. Did I grow this year? Does my current valuation reflect my real performance? If not, it's time to act. Because if you don't ask those questions, if you don't assess and revalue yourself, the market will default you to the lowest number you've ever agreed to. You know what's sad? Not being poor, but getting so used to being poor that you stop trying to change. Some limits don't come from your bank balance. They come from the quiet daily acceptance of a smaller life. And then we reshape every dream, every decision to fit the poverty mold we've silently accepted. But if you've made it this far in the video, I believe you don't want to live in that mold anymore. A wealth mindset is not a secret formula. It starts with honest conversation with yourself. It starts when you ask, what am I repeating that keeps me stuck? And then take one brave step, a small one, but in a new direction. No one else can change your circumstances for you. But your mindset, that's a choice you can make every single day. If this video helped you reflect more deeply on your financial journey, leave a commitment in the comments. Something like, I choose to think differently so I can live differently. Or any words that mark this day as the beginning of a real transformation. And don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, so that each future video becomes a stepping stone on your journey. Because every time you come back here, it could be one step closer to the financial freedom and peace you truly deserve.